by introducing our keynote, Sindia Rivera-Jimenez. She's an assistant professor at the Department of Engineering Education at the University of Florida. She has a BS and PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Puerto Rico at Mayagüez, my alma mater. So I'm very excited to present her. She has a myriad of experiences, but the highlights are she's also an affiliated faculty in chemical engineering, director of the Engineering Communities and Participatory Change, or EcoPac lab. She's a founder of elite programs for engineering transfer students and a former STEM teaching faculty across Hispanic serving institutions, community colleges, and R1 institutions. She has received a myriad of awards, including ASE's Best Conference Paper in 2025, 3 ASE Division and 2 PIC Best Papers, AICH's Chemical Engineering Education Service Award, the Idealist Star Award, and the Education Division Service Award, 2 UF Undergraduate Advisor and Mentor of the Year Awards, and an ASE Education Research Methods Apprentice Faculty Grant. So there are more details in the website if you want to check, but without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce Dr. Rivera-Jimenez.
Thank you. I sent you a request. Okay, perfect. It's weird to hear people talking about you like that. So thank you, Alexis, for the presentation. And thank you for the committee to invite me. I mean, I'm very excited to be here because I think Kemi and BME, we share a lot. I share friends. My friends are from BME, so colleagues. I think we are trying to do very similar things, and I'm very happy to be here. So thank you for the invitation. So again, my name is Sindia Rivera-Jimenez. Now I'm an assistant professor, but before that, I was a lecturer. I was a teaching faculty for maybe 10 to 12, 11 years. So it wasn't until recently that I did a crossover to engineering education research. So my first project that got funded was actually the phase 1 of the results that I'm going to be presenting to you. And it basically, I will be sharing a framework on a study that I conducted on faculty experiences through a virtual community of practice, very similar to what you have. So I'm very excited to share that. So let's start by asking, right, or saying, right, that if we are here, right, in this presentation or part of big is because we have tried to change something in our classes, right? It could be maybe we're designing new learning activities, maybe we're trying to integrate authentic assessment. Now with the big push, right, and momentum on AI, how do we see AI in the curriculum? Or maybe you want to establish a scholarship of teaching and learning agenda, or maybe do a engineering education research agenda, or maybe do broader impacts as part of a bigger project with some other collaborators. So we're here because we want to change things, and we see feasibility right within this community. So how many of us, right, have found that it is harder to sustain that change in the long term. We may do things in the class, it could be like for one semester, but how long can I sustain it? And what do I need to make it happen? So again, sustaining change in teaching is less a question of willpower, like it's not necessarily like an individual thing, it's beyond that. Is rather than of navigating the interlocking systems of context and culture that shape our work. And our work is very different, right? Depending on, the effort, the institution, the state that we live in, right? So there's multiple things that can shape the things that we do and the way we do it. I'm gonna move my group of people here, like my faces on this corner. Okay, perfect. So this is the voice of one of the participants in my study. I want to light up a fire in you, meaning the student, to realize that you can make change by me opening your eyes to realizing you can make impacts on communities and processes. Isn't it that a great intention that maybe many of us have? Isn't it like something that helps us to pursue and continue and motivate us to be every day in the classroom? So what allows faculty like you and Clara, right, to act on that vision? What helps them sustain change in systems that often resist it, right? How do we go from this idea of an intention, I want to do this, into an actual action that can sustain time and transform our pedagogical practices. So, it's an ecosystem problem, right? So we are not, the interactions between the student and your instructional choices are not isolated. Career progression matters. So you may have people that have teaching assignments, more time to dedicate to pedagogy, right? Have different career progressions or development, right? Compared to a research active faculty. There's national policy shifts. There may be topics that we may or may not be able to discuss in the class. There's disciplinary norms, right? Things that maybe you do in Chem-E may be slightly different from BME or mechanical engineering or computer science. There's also societal expectations and industry trends. Now, maybe semiconductor is a buzzword. Maybe, there's, the vaccines and the policies around vaccines have changed the landscape of the ways we can talk about it with our students. There's also the context, not only nationally, but in our institutions, right? Institutional policies, there's funding and accreditation involved. And also the role of professional organizations, department cultures, and peer network. So again, we can have this idea that we want to change in the classroom. We can pilot, the semester ends, and sometimes we go back to the old habits because there's so many things competing for us to sustain this with time. So again, there's a national momentum for us to change, but there's a reality that we have to manage locally and very contextualized to what we do. So why is lasting instructional change so hard to achieve? There's previous work, right, that have shown that there's a problem with the implementation, right? That research on institutional change shows that most faculty develops produce temporary change, but fail to transform long-term practice. There's many reforms that we do and things that we do in the class that are short-lived. Also, you don't teach the same class forever, right? So you have shifts in the teaching load. That's sometimes driven by external funding. Maybe you want to do experiential learning in your teacher engineering lab and you don't have enough resources to put that. Maybe you want to have a large scale equipment and you don't have the real estate, right, to do that, the space. So, there's also misaligned with the faculty local context, right? So the second thing that could happen, right, is that, there's a diffusion gap that we have to overcome. Even when faculty effectively change and know about teaching methods, widespread adoption across department remains limited. So basically, this is the reason why I bet you have formed this committee of practice. How can we go from our internal bubble to see what other people are doing across other institutions? And we can see how we can adopt that into our context, right? So again, this diffusion gap is real. Innovation rarely spread without supportive culture and incentives for teaching change. How do we make this community of practice effort not part of our invisible service, but rather something that can be counted as part of our scholarly work in the teaching practice and pedagogy? And then the context effect, right? So, individuals' motivation and training matter, but department norms, peer expectations, and evaluation systems ultimately shape whether change lasts or not. This leads us to this idea that faculty agency and transformation in the classroom are contingent on the ecosystem on which they work. So what has been done? An agency, right? This is not an idea that I came up with. This is building upon the shoulder of amazing work. So, initially, agency was defined as the capacity to take strategic action toward goals that matter personally and professionally. So this view is very individualized, right? So it's like you against the system, right? So as time passes, right, more efforts have come up with this idea that, it is not only about the personally and professional goals, but also agency needs space and a context, right, to develop into, right? So agency develops within shifting institutional structures and career stages. Again, that means that agency is dynamic. Maybe you have you want to do things early in your career that may look different after you get promoted, or maybe when you're 10, 20 years in. So then more scholarly work, actually in engineering education, look at agency as a deeply relational and negotiating within professional community. So it's not only what I want to do, what my institution can allow me to do, but also who are the peers that I hang out with, right? Who are the people that actually makes my work very meaningful. And we are human beings and we need those relationships, right, in our professional careers. So again, these studies primarily focus on agency in the context of faculty career advancement and professional identity development. So the work that we do, again, this is the initial phases of the work that we do, addresses the need for models that explain how agency operates in teaching practice and how systemic context shapes sustained pedagogical change. So again, this is specifically focused on the classroom. How do we impact the classroom, and how agency help us to do that? So in practice, right, we have spent years identifying what works in faculty development, but not enough understanding how faculty sustain transformation within the system that inhabits. Again, and it's complex, right? The individual in the institution, the disciplinary norms, et cetera, et cetera. So it becomes a very complex thing. So initially, my work wanted to ask two questions. First, how does transformational agency manifest? How does it look like? What does it mean to take action in something in the classroom? And how do institutional and professional environments influence the development of that agency? So to do so, I'm going to go quickly in the methodology, but I don't want you to get stuck into this. I just want you to see the transparency on how we conducted this. So to be able to interpret the data that we collected, that was qualitative data, we use a couple of theoretical inputs. So one is, how do we define transformational agency? So for us, transformational agency is a value-driven capacity to act intentionally with others and within structures to promote social change. In your case, social change could be student talent development, workforce development. It could be, do you want your BME students to get an industry job or to be good social citizens? So there's multiple ways of defining social change. And then the other lens is this idea of situated learning theory. Situated learning theory allows you to see learning and identity co-develop through participation in social practice. So situated learning allows me to see, how does community of practice grow, develop? How do we learn within communities of practice? We don't need to get a degree anymore, right? We already have our degrees, but we're still learning through this interaction. And then ecological system theory allows me to see, right, that agency development occurs through reciprocal interactions within nested systems over time. And I use that to inform, right, the way we analyze the data. We collected faculty experiences through qualitative work, and then we try to track or see how they enacted that and how that changes with time. So we did a qualitative case study design, and we explored agency in context. Our sample is small, but because we follow them through 8 months. Okay, so we did there was a virtual community of practice that had 14 participants, and we only followed 2 of them through time. And we went very deeply in the conversation with this participant to really see the impact. Again, this is phase 1 of the study, but really interesting data came out of it. We did a case study, an embedded qualitative case study. Again, the community of practice was a virtual community of practice formed through the American Institute of Chemical Engineering. So all of the participants were actively participating in AICHE. And then the data was collected through interviews, like I just mentioned, and we used reflective thematic analysis to try to make sense of the data. So the first thing that I want to share with you, right, is how does transformational agency manifest? Because I think at the beginning we thought that, agencies to make something change in the class, a particular change in the class, but we figure out through the manifestations, right, in this community of practice, that is actually, there's other manifestation beyond just a specific thing that you do in the class. Faculty in the community of practice were able to reflect, right? Engage in reflective practice with their peers. For example, Clara said, I realized I needed to help students see themselves as change agents. So that idea of reframing identity, reframing purpose, that actually happened through conversations in the community of practice. Building confidence through community, right? For example, Emily mentions, I had a community to talk to, and hearing what others did gave me courage to try it myself. So again, you may have the opportunity to do something, but it's not until other people validate it, in a sense, that you actually feel that you're capable of doing it. In the particular community that we formed, it was anchored, as I mentioned, on social responsibility was the topic that anchored the community of practice. There was a shared purpose of it. So there were a lot of comments or topics related to designing for this. So this is the traditional action that we see in our mind is this one, designing things for the class, right? So that also came out from the data. Then the fourth one is leveraging intentional disciplinary support. The way we recruited the participants in the community of practice was a big call. And this is an example of Emily saying that, it wasn't until the share actually recognized that this will be good for her career that she actually decided to participate in the community of practice. So the decision to be part of a virtual community of practice of this type of professional development is no longer invisible for the leadership, right? Because it can actually help the participant of that community to advance their career. And then iterating over the years, right? So this idea that, every year I adapt and build on it. This iterative process has become of who I am as an educator. So as you can see, these are different type of manifestation of action, right? Of the educator within that community of practice. So then the next question, right? How does faculty agency develops? I'm not going to get into the details on how this was categorized, but it was through the categories and the thematic analysis of the data. But basically, we build a model, right? And in the first stage of the faculty, or probably many of you are in this stage or may have encountered this. There's change begins within us. If you don't want to be part of the community, if you don't want to change, you don't change, right? It's intrinsically, we see this with the students, right? So the foundations of the agency is that I, the individual, I want to do something. Faculty start by making sense of their values, identity, teaching context by often questioning what kind of educator they want to be. And that question not only come naturally, it can be informed by the evaluation that you have every year. What are the criteria for promotion that you have to do? What are the trends, right? The ecosystem and all of the pools, right, that we have as educators. Then we found out with our participants that there's something called latent agency zone. So many of us actually live in here. This is where this is where we want to do change. Yes, we want to do change, but I feel constrained. I really don't know how to actually take that change. So again, faculty begins to form intentions by envisioning changes they want to make, even before acting on them. This is a phase where it is very reflective and action oriented, but not necessarily you're taking action on that phase. I want to point out that a participant or a person don't need a community of practice to actually change something in the classroom. What we're saying here is that a community of practice serves as a hub. It accelerates a change because it activates a relational process that otherwise you will not be able to have. And that relational process can come, maybe you have a group in your institution where you can have peers that give you feedback, or it could be a formal community of practice like the one that we have in VIC. Okay, so, this relational process is where things accelerate. The communities of practice act as a relational hub where reflection meets action. Faculty exchange ideas, try out new strategies, and co-construct meaning together. And it bridges institutional structures and peer networks. Remember, this community of practice was through AICHE. So that means that we had opportunities to bring speakers to talk about maybe social responsibility topics, or maybe you are bringing people, speakers or keynote speakers like me, right, in this conference or panels. So you're able to expand your world from your institution and bring bridges between your institution, right, the mesosystem and the exosystem, which are the things that happen beyond your discipline or your institution. And then through this relational process that we do in communities of practice, faculty begin to act strategically by aligning their values with institutional realities. That means that if I see other people doing, let's say, mental health work in their institutions, it is really cool, but it is something that I want to do. Is that a value for me? Is it something that I can do in my institution, right? So you're aligning that with your institutional reality. And you build coalitions and sustain change over time by building this relationship with other people outside your institution that allows you to do that in your class. For example, you just begin the conference saying, like, we want to build, I want to invite you to connect with other communities, right? The journals and things like that. Those are coalitions. These are different communities working together with the same purpose, and it's pedagogical change, right? So coalitions are really, really important. Again, this is kind of like the model that we're working in phase. This is the phase one of the model. We know that takes time. That's why 8 months was needed to follow the participants. The participants in this study, many of them actually submitted proposals, something that I never thought that it was going to happen before the community of practice. Many of them wrote papers that actually won Best Paper Awards. So, I mean, it was really impactful, and the topic was anchored again in social responsibility, but that can be any other type of anchor of a community of practice. Okay, so I'm going to pause and breathe. Okay, and I'm gonna allow if you have any questions or comments, because then we're gonna be reflecting together and see how we can apply this. Do we have any questions or comments so far?
Very good. Questions and comments. Don't be shy. It wouldn't be a teaching presentation if we don't take a break and do some active learning. So
Yeah, we can stretch.
yes. So I have to say I definitely find it very fascinating the idea of taking action and kind of not staying in the idea phase, like, oh, that sounds cool. Uh, so it's definitely interesting to break this model down into the formation of that initiative and that desire, and then break it down into, well, how old the faculty is, like how willing is the institution to work with them, which is something that I think in Beak I have intentionally tried to frame as like giving opportunities and like trying to put people in the front and have them do a thing, but almost intentionally with the point of add it to your CV, like add it to put it in the paperwork. So it's definitely fascinating. But anyhow, I'm talking too much.
Well, and I was gonna say, and for me, I knew I had a sense that every of the things that I found in the study were real, but I wasn't systematically collecting data about it, and I didn't have the jargon and the vocabulary to say, oh, I have reflected that I want to do this. I have the intention to do it. So now, instead of like just calling an intention to do it, we can say, oh, I'm in the latent agency zone.
Yeah.
So what can I do to be able to go from that latent agency to actually taking action, right? So again, I believe strongly about the power of learning as a group and helping each other and living in community. So again, the idea that there were theories that actually say, yeah, people learn very well in community. And the example is, this is why we foster teamwork in the classroom, because students learn differently in teams. So in a sense, communities of practice like this are kind of like teamwork to try to do the same target, which is pedagogical change. So again, the idea of creating a model like this is right now is qualitatively, and I'm going to be collecting more data, but in the future, I want to become a survey. How can we use this to evaluate impact of a community of practice in an individual? But there's no theories right now or models that allow us to operationalize all of the things that we have a sense that are true.
Yeah, which I will definitely connect to Yanfen because she is the research lead on B. But Maria Margarita Bruce asked a question, so I'm curious to get your thoughts on what happens after the implementation of the idea. How do you evaluate it? How do you respond to it if it doesn't work out the way you thought it would?
That's a great idea. That's a great question, Maria. So I am not evaluating that, right, in my study. But you can, if there's a community of practice, right, you can quantify, if you identify what are the type of manifestations of agency, I believe there's a way for you to quantify the impact or the amount of tries a person have done. So if the goal of the community of practice is to increase the number of people taking action and changing the class, right? Then you can quantify that. If you're thinking about evaluating the impact in the actual class, again, the community of practice can help the faculty collect that data, but not necessarily evaluate that impact. I think that depends on the instructor. So the community of practice that I built was on the scholarship of teaching and learning. So what we taught the faculty to do is to conduct research in education, basically. We walk them through the different stages of SLTL, and they were able to evaluate that impact. For the scope of my work, I don't go beyond that because I only follow them through the 8 months, right? But after that, of course, there should be ways to evaluate it. But I think, publications, dissemination, I think is critical. So if we don't disseminate and provide people, like, I think a good way to know if something works is that our peers tell us and give us feedbacks in the scholarship of teaching and learning, right? Maria, I don't know if that answers your question. If you're on that area.
Thank you so much for that. It really does, and just thank you for your feedback. That's really awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm happy that you have a lot of like communities that are based on paper, like scholarly work. That's where we can measure impact. How many people from our community are actually publishing in these venues that we're fomenting, right?
Yeah.
So
which again, like Maria, in the future, if you have ideas, please present in our meeting because our meeting is intended to be pretty much the playground for a lot of these basic implementations. Like we don't require data for our presentations because the intention is that it's just, hey, let's in a forum discuss an idea, kind of have some preliminary, and then have again veterans from the field as well as people that are still kind of learning to be in the same conversation. Because again, like if you check the participant list, like you will see a lot of like I get scolded when I call them elders, but I do it out of respect. Just people in the community that have been a long time in. So just that's a shameless plug for our presentations. But again, we have other communities. Any other questions? Okay. I think
so
we got a shy audience, so
it's fine. It's fine. So hopefully we can be active on the chat because I need you here. Active learning. I need you here, everybody. So I want us to apply this. And the reason why I want us to apply this is that I think there's opportunities from this that I show you to actually think about that you just said, Alexi, what can we do with this information and how we can improve the impact of our members at BIG, right? So what I want you all to do is use the chat. You don't have to talk if you don't want to, is to think of one teaching or curricular change you have tried, or maybe you want to try, and you want it to be sustainable, right? With time. And I have some examples here, like for me, the big thing right now in my brain is AI integration, because my university policies, we have the AI and like there's a lot of buzz with AI in my university. So for me, that is an example that I will bring to you. So if you can type on the chat, I will appreciate it. So we can chat about it. I'm gonna give you a couple, like 1 minute or so.
Yeah, go ahead. Put your ideas, implementations, things that you think would be really good. We got We got some good ideas here already. Ethics in technical content, improve student engagement in professional development groups like local BMES chapters.
Clinical immersion.
Advanced design and clinical immersion. Thread collaborative learning through multiple courses. Wow, that was an interesting one.
That's a really
Embedded
cool one.
broader representation in curriculum and reading lists. Wow, there's a lot of good ones.
Learning from mistakes, this idea of uncertainty, right, in the classroom, metacognition, yeah. Yeah, activities to develop student data skill, using AI to inform design configuration, right?
Accessibility is definitely a big one that's being pushed in
Accessibility.
OSU right now.
Yeah, this is really, really good. I mean, and what I like, I'm saving the chat because I think I'm gonna share with all of you, Alexis, because I think these anchors are important. You can classify them, and maybe this could be a specific focus topics, right, that you can explore later. Yeah, accessibility is repeating. Yeah, threading design skills in practice. This idea of threading, right? Like the curricular alignment, right? I love the fact that you're thinking like, probably you have access to that. That many faculty just think about their courses, and people that have taught many courses can say, oh, we should do this like scaffolded throughout the curriculum, right? People should learn this and thread it right throughout the different, the whole program, right? For the student. AI2, that's a great one. Yes. Okay, so this is great. So, I mean, we're on the same page. So now my question to you is, what was the main friction? What will be, if you want to implement the think about the future too, if you haven't done it, what will be the main friction point for you to do this change? And there's 4 options. It could be, I want to act but felt uncertain or constrained. I lacked trust peers or feedback. Time, incentive, departmental context. It faded after the semester ended, right? If that is an option of something that you implemented. And again, asking these questions are important because when you build a curriculum for a structured committee or practice, you need to understand people's friction points or certainties, because you can build a structured committee or practice and bring curriculum. The topic is important, but if it's not narrow and focused, the community of practice cannot anchor. And we need an anchor and understanding individually what are our constraints, so we can, even that we share the anchor or the topic or whatever we want to solve, we at least understand the individual constraints to make it happen. So I appreciate everybody participating here. So my 4th question, like in the chat, answer, what is one thing you want from BIP to help you sustain this change? If we can now develop today a structured committee of practice, what can we do? And you can type on the chat, but I will invite somebody to maybe chat about it. Maybe Maria's about how do you measure impact after, right? So do you need training on how to go from like assessment to a scholarship of teaching and learning? Maybe you need help on how to transfer that into something that is publishable beyond ASCE, right? Because ASCE seems to be the place we all publish, and it's okay. But how do we also do it with the broader, right, community, right, on education? So learning from peers on what work in other contexts. So maybe presentations of people that have published the work so you can read it later. That also brings highlights, right, the work of others, and you can mimic the way you also disseminate. That's really cool, Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca. I know you, Rebecca. And pull anecdotes, what case studies of other educators have used. Yeah, maybe have like a lightning round of people talking about their stuff. Learn best practices, learn from others, successfully or unsuccessfully attempt, get hard numbers, money if needed. Yeah, getting more in the details on how to work for success. Mentoring, give me the confidence to try things knowing other have tried, especially because I don't feel there is sufficient relevant support at my own institution. Dan, that's the reason why I created that community of practice. I hear you. Laura, training on convincing and supporting other people to do what you want them to do. That's like becoming an influencer. How to get needed support from the department. Yeah, that's always a hard conversation to have, and that conversation happens also with career stages, right? So maybe if you're new, the promotion and tenure, promotion or the tenure and promotion process kind of like vary per institution, but maybe mentoring can be coupled with that. Templates. Yeah, I have a really nice presentation on SOTL that I can give if you need it. I think a mentor will be helpful. Yeah, I think having someone else from another institution to provide the perspective and being able to bounce idea is helpful. Yeah, in AICHE, we have a mentor-mentee program, and typically you can, if you're an early faculty, you can find a mentor, and that it's like a 1-year program, and they have outcomes and things that they have to meet. So maybe there's other programs that we can kind of like use. If you want, Alexis, I can share that. I mean, this is great. If anybody wants to talk and say anything or a last reflection before I move on with some best practices, I'm happy to give your time to do so. Thank you. I'm saving the chat, so I'm making sure that that we have it. So, okay, so now that I'm presenting this model, again, one of the things that I value in when I transfer from teaching faculty to being a research active is the idea that I don't see my research as something that is just fundamental. I need to see it apply or impacting something. So typically in my lab, when we write about it, we also identify practices and do workshops or talk with important stakeholders about it. So again, the model, right, is the theoretical approach, and I can, there's going to be an upcoming publication on that, and I'm happy to talk about it. But again, why this matters, I think is the important question. So, faculty transformations begin with reflection and gains momentum through relational process. So people that may want to go to big, if you want to recruit members to big, right, maybe you need to have spaces where people can reflect on the needs that they want to meet, right? Or what are the things they want to do to see, and then tell them, well, big can offer you this because you have this community of practice, right? So it also allows us to recruit members to the community or form new communities. Faculty, if you're a faculty, right, you can identify your latent agency zones or the ideas you haven't yet acted on. You can use reflection not as a self-critique, which is important, it's super important, but as a space for intention formation. So if you make, I think Maria asked, what if something doesn't work? So, I mean, at least you tried it, right? So if we're engineering, if you think about design thinking, right, we tell the students, you need to do prototype A, B, C, D. So why we cannot treat ourselves with that kindness too, right? Why we cannot see the classroom as a design space that maybe this year didn't try, how I can collect data to test it out and make sure on what things it failed. And then the second time I do it again, maybe it will be improved, or maybe I need to change the idea, right? So you can engage in communities of practice or peer circles for feedback and relational experimentation. You can also have informal writing groups. Maybe you have 3 or 4 people that kind of like want to talk, want to do a change on ethics. I think somebody mentioned ethics or AI in the curriculum. So get together and kind of like form this informal community of practice and try to make sure if you can just collaborate, form a coalition, right? Or do something together. Then the other, I'm sorry, I went back. Okay, here. So again, the other important aspect is, right, sustained change requires structural and temporal supports. And I think it's important that we talked with other people to see how things are done in other places, right? I really like that. Cross-pollinate, maybe disciplinary cross-pollination, why not, right? So departments and institutions, right? If you are lucky to be in the leadership or have access to people that make decisions, right? You can treat teaching change as an ecosystem, not a one-time event. No, it's not something that just happen for this year evaluation, right? How can it happen sustain? And you can track that, the impact of the things that you're implementing with time. You should reward reflection and collaboration, right? So participating in this community of practice shouldn't be invisible service. It should be something that you write in your scholarship of teaching and learning narrative. You should be able to articulate, I found 2 people that I want to integrate AI in the curriculum, and we're meeting to make sure that we create something for the class, right? So we can innovate and put that in our evaluations, right? So we're making sure that it's not invisible. You can embed support for iterative cycles like follow-up after workshop, peer observations, and reflected check-ins. So again, these are different ways that departments and institutions can support faculty. And again, professional organizations, the community of practice that we built was through a professional organization. Big is another professional organization, right? You're embedded in a disciplinary anchor in a disciplinary area. So again, professional organizations can act as mesosystem connectors, helping faculty bridge institutional constraints through shared purpose, expand and link faculty through cross-institution communities of practice, create safe developmental spaces without local evaluation pressure. Isn't it nice to talk to other people about the problems that I have without fear that I'm going to be like penalized for that? Right? And it's not just to complain, but it's like, okay, I have these constraints. What question I can ask? What things I can do within the resources that I have to make change for my classroom and for my students? And then professional organizations also can model reflection-driven leadership through mentoring and peer development networks. And I think some of you already mentioned this, how big can help you to do this, right? So again, societies like BIG, AICHE, et cetera, right, can activate relational and coalitional agency across boundaries, resulting in the amplification of systemic transformation. Hopefully, if you are applying ethics or AI in the curriculum in a lab, you can meet with other people doing the same, and you can all 3 collect data and implement them and have discussions of what things are similar and what things are similar across different institutions. So it allows you to understand better how student learns in that environment and not necessarily is constrained in the institution that is happening. So how faculty agencies unleash, right, which is the topic of this presentation. How can we do this? So again, there's multiple ways of doing it, but I'm going to propose what we did with our community of practice. So basically, we had 8-month community of practice, and we went from this individual intention to collective experimentation and sustained practice. So individual intention basically was that, like the question that I asked, you create kind of like a survey of topics that the people may be interested in meeting about. So the intention of changing something in the class is what pulls people together. Okay, so if you want to do AI in the curriculum, that will be the anchor, the shared problem, right, that they want to solve. We don't know how yet, but it's just a matter of time. Initially, the community of practice needs to build trust between the participants. You don't know each other. We're people. We're people and we're professors. So we may not know how to interact with each other. So it does take time. So the facilitator have to make sure that they make check-ins, that they allow people to reflect, to chat. So typically communities of practice are small, no more than 15 people. And if they're doing virtually, that number is based because that's how many people you can see in one window in Zoom, right? In Zoom, I think you can only see 12 or 14. If you need to click right to see more people, then you're losing those people. You really need to see people's faces and make sure that people are interacting in that time. And then phase 2, right, includes experimentation and feedback. The community of practice become, more relational, hubs enable action. And in phase 3 is kind of like the refinement and sustainability, and agency become more sustained. I have a couple of practices that can be recommended. I'll share the slides if you want it. to share with everybody, Alexis. But basically, this is kind of like how we manage. We also evaluated our agendas and artifacts that we generated in our community. So the practices come from the management of the communities. And you can see that they go, from reflections to, faculty presenting ideas and kind of like doing elevator pitches on how the data was going to be collected, et cetera, et cetera. And then at the end, we talked a lot about dissemination and how to publish it at ASCE versus Chemical Engineering Education Journal or magazine and whatever. So we were like more action oriented, et cetera, et cetera. And if the people try it and it didn't work, we had sessions where faculty were able to voice out and receive feedback on how, if it didn't work, how it could be implemented again and changed so it's more successful. So, I mean, we're almost getting close to conclude the presentation. So I just wanted to let you know where are we in the work that we're doing. As I mentioned, we're submitting a publication more on the in the evidence base and the research that we conducted through faculties, but we are exploring to expand to phase 2. So we're going to be reaching out to multiple communities of practice. I have already 3 communities of practice that have been working for many years. So we want to see those community of practice that want to create evaluation, right, of the impact of their members, right, to be part of that community. So we're going to do more qualitative work and go beyond chemical engineering. We're going to be using that to refine the model that we are building. And my goal eventually with time, hopefully maybe 5 years from now, I have an instrument that we can actually use to evaluate pre and post of participants in a community of practice, which is something that we don't have because the constructs are new, right? That we're developing. So that's it. I want to say thank you. And I want to introduce my research group. This is my research group. The students that have the stars, these are my PhD students. Caroline Luby, she's a chemical engineer, and then Maria Camila and Miriam, they're both in engineering education. The ones on the right, Maganda and Juana, these are the undergraduate students from chemical engineering that help me to do all of the coding and all of the data analysis and help me with the interpretation as counterparts in the analysis process. And again, we have an amazing group of undergraduate researchers and graduate students in our group. So this is it. I am giving you a couple of minutes early, but I wanted to make sure that if people have comments or questions, we can have a nice open discussion.